Tonight, we ask a particularly difficult question. How far is too far? Can you go too far in pursuit of justice? Can you go too far to protect your family? In the spring of 1850, this was the question facing both U.S. Army soldiers and the native Pomo people of Northern California's Clear Lake. And in the end, the answer would result in one of the greatest tragedies in American history. Tonight, join History at the OK Corral as we examine the brutal, little-known story of the Battle of Bloody Island.
Northern California, May 6, 1850. Just before sunrise, a village of roughly 200 Pomo native men, women, and children lie peacefully sleeping on a small island near the southeastern shore of Clear Lake. As they slumber, a contingent of U.S. Army soldiers, under the command of Captain Nathaniel Lyon, slowly take up positions surrounding the village. Then, just as the first rays of sunlight begin to scatter on the lake's cool waters and the first Pomo villagers begin to stir, the air is suddenly filled with explosions and gunfire as the soldiers fire upon them with their rifles, and artillerymen on the far shore pour an initial volley from their cannons into the island. In an instant, the small village is thrown into abject chaos as the screams of women and children fill the air and the few warriors present arm themselves. But their resistance is to little avail as the bullets and artillery continue to pour into the small, concentrated area of the island.
All around the village, the Pomo begin to fall dead, dying, and wounded. Many of them attempt to flee into the water, making a bid for the nearby shoreline. Most, however, are cut down in the muddy shallows.
In but a few moments, a scene of complete and utter carnage has engulfed the native village, and it seems that there will be no end in sight as the gunsmoke continues to fill the air and volley after volley from the Army's weapons continues to blanket the island with deadly effective fire. Soon, the waters around the island are stained red with blood, and still, the firing continues.
But this attack, however brutal, is not by any means random, and the Pomo, though certainly caught off guard by the timing and ferocity of the Army's onslaught, are fully aware of why it is happening. In the year prior to this, several Pomo warriors had allegedly been involved in the murders of two prominent local ranchers, Andrew Kelsey and Charles Stone, whose mutilated bodies had been discovered on their expansive rancherias. Word has spread like wildfire amongst the surrounding settlements and ranches, sending many fleeing south towards the northern reaches of the San Francisco Bay. When word had reached the U.S. Army's 1st Dragoons headquartered in Sonoma under the command of Captain Nathaniel Lyon, the prevailing sentiment amongst the men at the fort was that revenge must be exacted upon the murderers. In the early months of 1850, several reconnaissance and intelligence-gathering missions had been sent into the Clear Lake area under the auspices of trying to root out the specific warriors suspected in the double murders. However, in actuality, the bulk of their efforts had centered around locating the Pomo village and planning this morning's attack. To Captain Lyon, the killing of two of the area's most prominent citizens is a crime that all of the Pomo must pay for. But the killings of Kelsey and Stone were by no means random, senseless violence. They were, in fact, acts of retribution carried out by the Pomo in response to years of abuse and subjugation. In fact, the Pomo, who have inhabited this land for centuries, have endured decades of abuse at the hands of the Spanish, the Mexicans, and then the Americans, by way of what amounted to a de facto slavery system in which they were forced into labor without pay. This system had intensified with the institution of California's mission system, but had truly reached its zenith with the advent of the 1849 gold rush, which saw an influx of ranchers such as Kelsey and Stone into the area. While native experiences with the missions and with local ranch bosses did in fact vary wildly, Kelsey and Stone had amounted to some of the most belligerent and abusive employers in the area.
they had repeatedly forced the Pomo into unpaid labor and physically assaulted not only their men, but their women as well. After multiple instances of this, the Pomo had seen fit to wreak justice on their own terms.
Though no one knows for certain what transpired, several different accounts have spread like wildfire through the area. Most versions hold that the ranchers had whipped and then mortally shot a young Pomo man who had been working for them as a laborer. Some accounts hold that this was in retaliation for theft, and others simply a cruel response to the Pomo's repeated request for more foodstuffs as payment for his work. Most accounts of the killing of Kelsey and Stone hold that the Pomo had rushed the rancher's sleeping quarters in the dark of the pre-dawn. Kelsey had fled the quarters, but was quickly chased down and dispatched with multiple blows to his head with a large rock. Stone was reportedly cornered within the quarters and viciously whipped before being dispatched as well with his own large knife. Accounts differ on whether the bodies were hidden under cowhides or dumped in the tules of Clear Lake, but in either case, they were soon discovered by neighboring ranchers, and the cry for vengeance against the Pomo soon resounded about the area.
Reports of, quote, hostile Indians having killed the two well-known ranchers spread like wildfire, causing a panic throughout Lake, Napa, and Sonoma counties. Panicked locals soon reported the incident to the U.S. Army officials at the Benicia Arsenal, an Army ordnance hub located on the north side of Carquinez Strait, northeast of the San Francisco Bay. Here, the reports reached the desk of Captain Nathaniel Lyon. Lyon, who graduated West Point 11th in his class in 1841, was a veteran of the Seminole Wars and the Mexican-American War, where he had earned a reputation as a competent but ruthless officer. Stationed to this Northern California post in 1849, he had made it his mission to maintain order in the area. Within weeks of the murders, Lyon received orders to take his men north and to, quote, punish the guilty. They had moved out with adequate supplies for weeks in the field, and as they made the roughly 80-mile trek northwards, they also coordinated with local militias along the way and added to their already sizable forces. In the meantime, word had also spread amongst the Pomo, and panic had set in amongst their ranks.
Many among them actually denounced the murderers as having now condemned all of them to the punishments that were surely coming. Others were resolute in their desire to stand and fight the soldiers. It was ultimately decided that their best chance would be to congregate on the small island in Clear Lake known as Bonopotishi, roughly translated as small hill in the water. The island was surrounded by shallow water and indeed presented a location that would be easier to defend than hiding in the woods or in the open fields. At the same time, Lyon and his men had mustered and then made their march northwards. Pomo families began to gather on the island and stockpile supplies. Meanwhile, Lyon and his men had passed through Napa Valley and then crossed the Mayacamas Mountains before finally pouring into the Clear Lake Basin. Here, south of the lake, at a location known as Robinson Point, they had drawn up their final plan of attack. They would split their forces, with one side attacking from the north and the other attacking from the south, trapping the Pomo on the island.
This contingent of soldiers to the south would be armed with 2 field cannons, ready and able to unleash artillery fire upon the Pomo. The field cannons, combined with the rifle fire of the soldiers attacking from the north, would unleash a volume of fire unlike anything the Pomo had seen before. With the plans in place, the men moved off in their respective directions and made ready for the next morning's attack.
Just before sunrise, the men from the northern group of soldiers waded through the shallow waters and took their places amongst the tules. Then, just as the first Pomo had begun to stir from their sleep, the soldiers had unleashed their first volley of rifle fire into the village, indiscriminately firing into lodges full of men, women, and children. The initial volley had unleashed chaos, and now panic overtakes the island, with Pomo men attempting to arm themselves and fight back. and women and children attempting to escape in the shallows to the south of the island. But as they do this, the field cannons unleash their first volley of fire upon the island, cutting down several Pomo at once. Those remaining now flee to the western side of the island, the side nearest the mainline shore, where they are met by Lion's remaining men who pour more rifle fire onto the island.
All of the Pomo have now collectively realized that they are not only trapped, but there is no effort being made to distinguish combatants from non-combatants. Horrified and enraged by this, warrior after warrior makes his final stand along the small island's shore, attempting to cover their families' retreats. One after another, the Pomo men are cut down. In many cases, so are their fleeing families. Some of the women and children make their escape by diving into the water and breathing through hollowed-out reeds.
But many more are killed where they stand, with so many falling near the island's edge that the waters of the lake that surround it are now stained red with blood. A few of the Pomo are able to make it to the shore and to escape into the surrounding forest. Though they are able to skillfully meld into the landscape, many of them will soon perish of their wounds. Lion and his troops now seize control of the area and scour the island for surviving Pomo to take prisoner. But they find not a single survivor on the island. The Pomo, longtime inhabitants of this area, have now permanently lost their homelands.
Within months, the area will be flooded with American settlers, and the indentured labor system that had already harshly impacted the Pomo would be redoubled. Tragically, they would never regain their lands again. For the Army's part, the soldiers involved in what has come to be known to history as the Bloody Island Massacre will face no retribution for their actions, and will simply return to garrison duty in the weeks to come. Captain Nathaniel Lyon will be praised by his superiors for his effectiveness in carrying out his duties. He will go on to continue his career in the Army, rising to the rank of Brigadier General in 1861. With the outbreak of the Civil War, Lyon served with distinction until August 10th of that year, when he would be killed in action at the Battle of Wilson's Creek, making him the first general to be killed in action during the war. Today, the massacre at Bloody Island is commemorated with a simple historical marker. The plaque sits on the location of the island, which is now part of the mainland due to shifting water lines. The marker lies just south of the town of Nice as a testament to one of the darkest and most little-known events in American history. But the many little-known stories that comprise the vast and complex history of the Old West are, for tonight, other stories for other times. Thank you for joining us on this episode of History at the OK Corral. If you like this story, click on one of the videos on your screen now to watch more. Also, if you'd like to learn more about Old West history, be sure to sign up for the HOKC newsletter. Link is in the description below. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time on History at the OK Corral, home of history's greatest shootouts and showdowns.